We're talking with Paul S. Ryan of Common Cause. Paul, following the money at the state and local level is a little more challenging than at the federal level. What's the basic reason for that?
Well, one reason is that every state has its own laws. So if you're trying to follow the money in a few different states, that means you have to familiarize yourselves with a couple different sets of laws, whereas if you're following money at the federal level, all you have to worry about is the Federal Election Campaign Act. But one other obstacle is that the agencies, the governmental agencies at the state level that compile the money and politics data, that administer the rules around money and politics, they are frequently under-resourced. So they can't get that data up on the website as quickly or as in clean a form as maybe they would like to. So there are resource constraints as well as at the state and local level.
What resources exist for journalists at the state and local level?
Common Cause has presence in 30 states. We have a lot of relationships in even more states. We have members. We have more than 800,000 members now scattered across all 50 states. So first and foremost, we have people in these states that know the political lay of the land and have relationships. In these states where we have a presence, we know what the rules around money and politics are. We also know who the key players around money and politics are. And we know about any reform efforts that are underway. So a good way to just take the temperature of the money and politics landscape in a state is to reach out to Common Cause.
The National Institute on Money and State Politics, better known as followthemoney.org, what sorts of resources do they have?
They are an excellent resource. They compile data on money in state-level elections for all 50 states, and they've been doing it for decades. So they not only have current data, but they have longitudinal data to the extent that you'd want to dig into that and see how things have changed over time. They've also, in recent years, begun adding some data on money in municipal elections, particularly for bigger cities that have that data readily available in digital form. And they've also begun collecting money related to lobbying expenditures at the state level. The really nice thing about the Institute's website, followthemoney.org, is you can go there and you can search across states in a way, data from multiple states in a specific category or type in a way that would be really, really labor intensive if you were to try to go to each and every state's website and pull that data on your own.
Mm-hmm. And what other groups or organizations at the state level can be helpful? For instance, you mentioned government agencies.
Government agencies are really important allies for a money and politics reporter, both at the municipal level and at the state level. They are going to be the experts within their jurisdiction, within their city or state, on what the law requires. There are some constraints on what they can say, particularly to reporters. They're not going to offer opinions, for example, on whether someone's broken a law, but they can tell you what the law is. They can tell you where to find copies, the text of the law, which is important to journalists. They can point you to the data that might be relevant to the story that a journalist is working on. So you definitely, as a journalist covering money and politics, definitely want to make friends with the staff at the state and municipal agencies that are administering campaign finance laws.
And what states are doing a good job of requiring transparency in campaign finance?
Cutting edge states, I think, would have to be California, Connecticut, Montana's doing a great job. So a few states out there on the cutting edge.
Mm-hmm. And what states aren't doing so well? What's the bottom of the list?
The bottom is pretty broad. So, unfortunately, in the past 6 or 7 years, since the Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court, we've seen a flood of so-called dark money into national, federal level elections as well as state elections. And most states, I would say the overwhelming majority of states, they haven't done a good enough job of keeping up to date with their campaign finance laws to shine light on this dark money. So there are a few dozen states in the not doing a good enough job category.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned the Supreme Court, which you said consistently backs disclosure and transparency in campaign finance. Can you tell us what the what the votes have been over time? And then you had a great Scalia quote.
Sure. So for decades, the Supreme Court has been upholding challenged campaign finance disclosure laws, typically in the past 10, 12, 15 years by 8-1 margins. The only justice on the court in recent years who has opposed disclosure laws has been Justice Thomas. Even the late Justice Scalia, who most think of as being a conservative justice, he was in fact a conservative justice, he was a strong defender of campaign finance and other types of electoral transparency. And in the very end of his concurring opinion in a case called Doe v. Reed from about 5 or 6 years ago, he went on to say that, paraphrasing him, that he would not look forward to the day when people could campaign anonymously as a result of some Supreme Court decision, because that does not sound like the home of the brave. Great defender. And again, we've been getting great decisions from the Supreme Court for years now upholding these disclosure laws.
Public financing at the presidential level has largely collapsed, as you pointed out. But you said that there are some states and localities that are forging ahead with public financing of campaigns. Could you describe a few of those?
Sure. The most recently enacted, actually not literally most recently, among the most recent enacted campaign finance or public financing programs is the City of Seattle's. And the reason I mention that first is because it's a brand new approach to public financing that advocates call a voucher system, whereby voters receive by mail a number of vouchers, $25 vouchers, I think, is the amount that is given to Seattle voters. And then they can turn these vouchers over to candidates who opt into the public financing program by agreeing to spending limits and some other constraints. So the unique aspect of these voucher programs is that the donor doesn't even need to put in a penny of their own money. They can still play a role in funding electoral campaigns. The other types of programs that have been around for a while in terms of approach are matching funds programs. New York City has had a matching public financing program on the books for a couple decades, whereby small private contributions are matched by a much higher ratio. I believe it's now 5-to-1 or so in public dollars. City of Berkeley, California just enacted one of these matching funds program by ballot initiative approved by voters in November of 2016. City of Portland, Oregon, state of South Dakota likewise recently enacted public financing programs. So we're seeing a lot of interest in public financing programs around the country.